Good afternoon. I'm going to talk about Badlands and Darklands. And to do that, I'm going right back 41 years to 1972. Now, it looks like I'm about 16 and Maureen, my wife, is 12. But I was 25 and she was 22, and I just graduated from London Business School with a master's degree. And we were about to set off to get travel out of our systems. We did it by buying this old car for $150 in London and setting out to take it as far east as it would go. If it broke down, we'd leave it by the roadside and walk away. Well, it got us across Europe, it got us through Turkey. The mountain in the background is Mount Ararat. Any biblical scholars will know that's where Noah landed his ark. And we carried on through Turkey into Iran and across Iran and into Afghanistan. And we eventually sold the car in Kabul in Afghanistan for about a $5 profit. I've been saying recently that it was Osama bin Laden's getaway vehicle, and if they could have tracked that car down, they would have found it parked outside a compound in Abbottabad in Pakistan, and they would have saved all the effort of making the movie Zero Dark 30. And we carried on through Pakistan, through India, up to Nepal, down through Southeast Asia, till eventually we arrived in Bali, where we met some New Zealanders, as you do, with a yacht, the Sun Peddler out of Auckland, and we hitched a ride on their yacht, sailed down to Australia, hitchhiked down to Perth, hitchhiked across to Sydney, and we arrived in Sydney Boxing Day 1972 with 27 cents left between us. We'd cut it a little bit tight money-wise, but it was a great trip, and the whole idea of going around the world in a year got thrown out the window. And during the following year, we wrote what turned out to be the first Lonely Planet guidebook. Across Asia on the cheap, all of Asia in 96 pages for $1.80. It was only ever sold in Australia and New Zealand, but it started off a lot more books over the years to come. But for me, it also started a real interest in the sort of edgier, darker lands of our world. Places that I've been through then, like Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And then a few years ago, Mr. George W. Bush came along and gave me a reason for some travels. When he said there was an axis of evil, I thought, well, I want to go there. I mean, what do? You want to see it. So I did. So I started off going back to Iran, and I really like that picture because there's the Ayatollah Khomeini in the background looking down on a hillman hunter. And in a previous lifetime, I was an engineer, and I actually worked for Hillman. And when they eventually went broke, they sold the entire production line to Iran. And for the next, God knows how many years, they turned out Hillman hunters. You'd go to a typical street in Tehran, and just about every car is a Hillman hunter. They called them paycans or arrows. So I went to Iran, and I went to Iraq. There I am, crossing the border into the northern regions of Iraq from Turkey, being greeted by some very friendly Iraqi soldiers. And I went to North Korea, the third country on the axis of evil, and quite the strangest and weirdest country I have ever been to. And we will get back to to North Korea in a little bit. And I went to some other bad countries as well. Albania, which really wasn't bad. It just cut itself off from the outside world for over 40 years. Enver Hoxha was the dictator who did that. I went to Libya. You know, I was there during the Gaddafi era, and I really thought that Gaddafi was the Michael Jackson of dictators. He just loved to dress up, you know. He liked to be there he was in his desert chic outfit, and the next billboard you came to, he'd be in his army outfit from the Sergeant Pepper School of Army Outfits. And then you'd come to his Navy outfit, and it was from the HMS Pinafore School of Naval Uniforms. Strange man. I went to Burma, Myanmar, definitely a bad country. You know, one of the things about Buddhism, it's a very competitive religion. It's whose Buddha stretches the longest, or who's the most gold-plated, or in this case, whose Buddha has the widest, biggest spectacles. This was the temple of the spectacle Buddha, and they're 3 meters across. I went to Cuba. For 50 years, assorted American presidents have been saying, we need some regime change here. But if Fidel lives another few years, he'll outlast Barack Obama, and he'll be on to his 12th American president, all of them saying, get rid of him. And I went to Saudi Arabia, of course, where most of the 9/11 hijackers come from, and that's the second weirdest country I've ever been to. But everywhere I went, I met really nice people. I'm walking through a street in Kashan in central Iran, And Ahmed Persayudi, this gentleman, comes over and grabs my arm and starts dragging me towards his Hillman Hunter. And I think, here I am in Iran, I'm being kidnapped, fantastic. But I pretty much was. He said, "Look, I'm a guide, I speak English, come with me, we are going to the Finn Gardens." And off we went, and I was his for the next 2 days. He took me to his house, his wife fed us. Everywhere we went, he said he's my long-lost brother and he deserves the local price. Saudi Arabia, Saad Juman, a guide I used in the south of a town called Najran, very close to the border with Yemen. Or when I went around Afghanistan, Mobin Jamshedi, who showed me around Afghanistan. And there we are at the shrine of Hazrat Ali in Mazar-e Sharif in the north of Afghanistan. We also went to Bamiyan. Well, actually, first of all, we went by some tanks, because one of the things you find everywhere in Afghanistan is abandoned Russian war equipment. But Bamiyan, where the Buddhas used to be, that's the niche where the big Buddha used to stand until the Taliban destroyed it. But you do also in Afghanistan find examples of Buddhism that has survived the Taliban. Takti Rustam Stupa, this is a stupa cut out of solid rock. And I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen a picture of it until I went there. And I think it's terrific at where we are in the world today, that you can still go to places which you may have heard about, but you haven't actually seen pictures of or don't know that much about. The thing I really wanted to see in Afghanistan on that trip, though, was the Minaret of Jam, this amazing minaret in the center of the country. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and I was there in May 2006, so 5 months into the year. And the guest house at the bottom of the minaret had a little guest book, and I signed my name in the guest book, looked through, and in May 2006, I was the first visitor that year. So we're 5 months into the year at a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and finally the first visitor turns up, and that's a terrific feeling. But I said that, these were all interesting countries, but I had so much fun going to Badlands, I thought I'll go to some more. I'll go to Darklands as well. So I'm working on a new book, which has taken me to Congo, where, of course, you do meet gorillas. And you can also find one of the most amazing volcanoes, the Nyiragongo volcano. I climbed up there with 4 other people, and we spent the night on the crater rim. And it was like a children's idea of what a volcano should be like, the lava spurting up and the red lava lake. It was just a fantastic sight. I went to Colombia. I was in Colombia just a few weeks ago. A country that's had all sorts of problems, whether it's narco-terrorism or kidnapping or guerrilla forces fighting the government, but also some of the most beautiful architecture in South America, beautiful old Spanish colonial towns. This is the town of Cartagena on the Caribbean coast of Colombia. I went to Haiti, and a sad country. It's a country that's had all sorts of problems, and yet it really had a heroic birth. At Toussaint Louverture, the wonderfully named slave who revolted against the French and led the country to freedom. And yet, since then, everything seems to have gone wrong in Haiti, including, of course, earthquakes, much like New Zealand. That was the royal palace, the presidential palace in the center of Haiti. I was there just before the earthquake, and that was it last year when I was there. The earthquake in 2010, it was like a wedding cake dropped on the ground. Nauru, now there's not a bad country, a dark country, a country that's certainly had some problems. Briefly, the richest country in the world on a per capita basis, and now it's Australia's refugee prison, where eventually they get let out and they come to Australia or New Zealand. But an interesting place to visit. Maureen, my wife, and I went back to Pakistan last year, traveled up the Karakoram Highway into China. And going up through northern Pakistan, you find this is another country with a Buddhist history and Buddhist rock carvings and other signs of the life of Buddhism there long before Islam took hold. Palestine and Israel, I went to those countries about a year ago. That's near Ramallah, the unofficial capital of Palestine, a portrait of Yasser Arafat on the wall it's been called various things, the segregation wall, the separation wall. Palestinians even call it the apartheid wall. Bougainville, I went up there to Papua New Guinea. I took this little boat across in the Solomon Islands. Anybody who's read that wonderful New Zealand-authored book, Mr. Pip, by Lloyd Jones, will know a little bit about the sad story of Bougainville. I came across on that boat, and it was an unofficial arrival because there's no immigration post there at the south of Bougainville. So I went round to the police station and reported as an unofficial arrival, and they stamped in my passport, seen at the police station, and told me when I came to some place with an immigration office to go in and regularize it. And 10 days later, I finally arrived officially in New Guinea. What I really wanted to see there, though, was Admiral Yamamoto's crash site. Admiral Yamamoto was the Japanese admiral who plotted the attack on Pearl Harbor. And in 1943, the Americans had broken the Japanese naval code, and they knew he was going to be flying over Bougainville, and they intercepted his aircraft and shot him down. And I thought, well, there you are. There's American public enemy number one, shot down in 1943. And the next time somebody as big a public enemy as that was really Osama bin Laden. I went to Zimbabwe, and another dark land, I guess, and this elephant's about to have a dark future if it doesn't get out of the way. And the train actually tooted, and the elephant retreated. But I was saying at the start that the weirdest country I'd been to anywhere in the world was North Korea. And really the thing about North Korea is it's a fake country. We know about Potemkin villages, fake villages in the era of Catherine the Great in Russia. Well, this is an entire fake country. Here's a billboard. It's mosaic, actually. It could have been a swimming pool bottom. But it's the portrait of the great leader and the dear leader, Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, in front of the log cabin where Kim Jong-il was born at the time that his father was leading the fight against the Japanese. It's a fake. Actually, he was born in Russia. The Russians had evacuated him from North Korea before the end of the war, and he only came back to North Korea after the war had finished. You see lots of billboards around the country. Here's the deer and the great leader surveying another bountiful harvest. No mention here of a little famine that killed over 1 million people, and the South Koreans have to keep shipping food there to keep the North Koreans going. Pyongyang, the capital, I'm on the 43rd floor of a hotel looking over the city at dawn. Not many lights on and not many cars on the street. What you can see in the background, though, is the triangular peak of the Ryugyong Hotel, the Hotel of Doom, because it's been 20 years since they finished the outside structure, and they've never finished it. They've never finished the interior, and they're still talking about next year it's going to be done. The Grand People's Study Hall, the National Library of Pyongyang, of North Korea. And when you go there, you realize who the Americans copied the statue of Lincoln from. Clearly, some American had gone there and thought, that's an interesting pose, we'll copy that for the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The fake subway. It's a wonderful subway. It looks like the subways you see in Moscow, beautiful artwork. And you get on the train as a tourist, and you go along to the next station, and you get off. And the story is that all the people on the train with you, all the Koreans, are actually actors. And it'll only go one station further down the line, and will stop, and they'll all get off. And the next time the train runs is when tourists come again. And the reality, actually, is it's a real train service, and it really does run every morning, taking people to work. But when you so believe that it's all fake, you think that must be as well. Mass games. Fantastic thing to see. 100,000 people, thousands of children on the stage, and you can even see New Zealand on that map. And then tens of thousands of women come out, dressed in blue, and it's as if a wind is blowing across the stadium floor. It's winter in Pyongyang, and they bend one way and they bend the other. And in the background, children flip up these cards to show Pyongyang in winter. Quite fake, of course, because you wouldn't have all those lights on. They haven't got enough electricity. And then the kids come running out. It's a day on the beach. They've got their inflatable rings, thousands of them. And then it's tennis. It's Wimbledon time, and the girls come out with their tennis rackets. But then the cards flip up again, and a general appears in the background, and the North Korean army marches out. And what do? They dance. Now, come on. When we decide wars by whose army dances best, my money's on the North Koreans. They dance so well, although just recently I was in India, the border closure every night between India and Pakistan, and the Indian army dances really well as well. And when it comes to kicking your hat off your head, the Indians are really good at it. But really, the high point of my trip to North Korea was going down to the DMZ, or DMZ as the Americans say, which of course is military speak, because it's not demilitarized at all. You go down on this freeway, and I had to wait a long time to get a vehicle coming by because there was nothing at all on this 6-lane freeway. But eventually I got 3 vehicles, not just one. And you get down to the border, and you're looking across from North Korea. There's South Korea, only 100 meters or so away. You can see the South Korean soldiers and the North ones. And these little blue huts actually straddle the border. There we are, there's the border. This is not demilitarized. Do not try to get across that border. You will die. But what you can do is you can go inside that hut. And I'm down at the South Korean end of the hut, looking out into South Korea. So here we are with a table in the middle, and I can walk around the table. North Korea, South Korea. Fantastic. I can go from one country to another and still be safe. And I can also look across. There's the doorway into South Korea, with 2 North Korean soldiers stopping me from breaking free and getting into South Korea. Well, having seen that, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to come in that other door. But I can't go out that door, walk 20 meters down and come in this door. The only way to get from the North Korean door to the South Korean door was to go out the North Korean door, travel back up that empty freeway, 150 kilometers to Pyongyang, fly 800 kilometers to Beijing, fly 950 kilometers to Seoul in South Korea, take another bus 50 kilometers back to the other door, 20 meters away. Well, I had to do that. So a year later, I was back. And there he was in his taekwondo pose, stopping me getting into North Korea. And I've got to tell you, of all the borders I've crossed anywhere in the world, that was the weirdest one. Thank you very much.